because of Sublime Text 2. Now I follow Reddit, Reddit's Vim group, and they tend to do a lot of, like occasionally somebody comes in and goes like, I'm coming from Sublime Text 2, I really like this feature about multiple cursors, and I would really like to have the same thing in Vim. And this is why there are a bunch of plugins that kind of try to emulate this, and I'm going to show a couple of these. Like one of these is Mark Multiple, made by Adi Napoli. I'm not quite sure of the real name, but that's the GitHub username. And the way it works, basically, let's say this piece of code here. What I want to do is rename startup to, I don't know, foobar. Right? Except I want to rename all 4 of them. So what this plugin does is you press Ctrl N, and it marks the current word. And then you press Ctrl N again, and it jumps to the next occurrence. And then when you're done, you type C, and you type foobar, and it changes it across the marked things. And this is very close to how Sublime Text does it, except there you kind of like point and click. So this was the first case.
Does this jump to the next occurrence of the same word, or?
Yes, it jumps to basically the word on the cursor.
So if they weren't vertically aligned, then it would.
Oh yeah.
Because it seems just like visual block mode.
Yeah, I guess bad choice. But look at this one, for example, runtime pad.
Okay, that was my question.
I didn't think this through, I guess. And yeah, foobar, and it replaces it. So a different plugin, and this was the first plugin I actually saw. It's very simple, and it's I don't know, his first Vim plugin, and he was very excited about it. Another plugin I recently damn it, I apologize for this. Just a sec. Right. Ingo Karkat did a similar plugin recently. I think he was also inspired by this. Except his plugin is a bit. It's very interesting use case. Now, here's what he does. Let's say you have a variable called foo, which has a string foo, right? And if you type gc, like instead of typing cw, for example, to change the word, you type gcw, and this is like a global change, right? And you change foo to bar, and when you exit in insert mode, it should change it across the entire. But I'm assuming that.
Try with startup.
Let me try this. Bar. Yeah, this is it. The reason was the motion actually. And this is a plugin I don't have much experience with, honestly, because I don't. This use case, what it does is it replaces occurrences on the same line, which seems like a very kind of a weird use case for me. But oddly enough, after I discovered this plugin, I've actually seen a lot of instances where this is actually useful. For example, I don't know, like a variable called category, which is assigned to params category or something. It's like surprisingly, you tend to have these same things on the same line, but it's never been very that interesting for me, that interesting use case, which is why I don't actually use it. The funny thing is, if you don't have an occurrence on the same line, it's actually gonna change like globally, like change everything. So it's kind of weird. It's a very exotic use case, and you can see that I think that Ingo simply has this kind of some kind of use case for this, and this is why he wrote it. But it's still an interesting effort in this direction. Multi-edit is another very interesting example, though unfortunately it's incomplete, and in fact the author says something like, this is actually discontinued. I'm not going to continue working on this because, well, I'll actually get back to that. But how it works, this is actually like the closest thing to Sublime Text functionality. Let's see how it was done. Okay, you mark a region, like a visual region with comma A, and then you can go like, let's see, you can go anywhere else and like mark another region or something, I think. Yeah, and it could be actually anything else with comma A, and then we type comma I. You have this cursor that dynamically updates like both places.
Comma is your leader?
No, it's actually comma in the plugin. It's not. It's kind of a proof of concept plugin. I'm showing you because it's interesting. This is actually the closest thing to Sublime Text 2 editing that I could find. but it's actually discontinued even. And I'll come to that again, but I would not use this plugin. In fact, the author himself wouldn't use it. I just think it's really interesting and I want to make a point about it. The last plugin I want to show you related to this is actually my own plugin. I looked at, I was inspired by my Mark Multiple, and actually I poked around the source code because I was interested in it. And I had this idea of something slightly different. Now, I'm actually going to close this because I'm not sure if, yeah, okay. My plugin is very similar to a Mark Multiple, except slightly different. Basically, instead of marking things one by one, what I do is I just mark an area with, well, I have a command for this, that you can't see it because Windows, damn it. How about this? I'm just going to show you this, hopefully I won't have to.
It's awesome stuff.
Oh, never mind. Oh, sorry. I'm just going to use a mapping for now. But basically, the idea is I mark this area here. You can see the markers from top to the bottom. And any change I make is going to propagate through this area. Foobar, foobar, or like something. And this is undoable. And this basically puts me in this kind of like multi-mode in which any change I make propagates. If I don't actually mark an area, it defaults to the entire buffer, so I can change file type to foobar, pathogen to foobar, everything to foobar. I can change runtime path to foobar? Funtime path.
Big jobs.
And stuff like that. And I found this very particularly interesting for, and of course I'm going to talk more about it because it's my plugin, and I'm more familiar with it. But for example, I found this very interesting for renaming variables. For example, imagine I have this function over there called add plugin, and now I don't like the names of the variables, and I really want to rename them, and I don't know what kind of good names I could think of. For example, so I just mark this function and I go, okay, I'm going to rename dir to directory, and I'm going to rename entry script to, I don't know, like start script. But I know what, actually don't like start script, I like initial script or whatever. And this kind of like quick iteration is just like what I like in this plugin. This is kind of what I feel it gives me. Like the ability to just make a couple of quick changes, just to prototype some kind of a
Can you make 2 marks? So one for this function for the app plugin, and then another 2 marks for example the source?
No, not really. It's like it's just limited to a single one. Although this is an interesting use case.
Because maybe you are doing development, you say, oh, I need to refactor this method and this method, and then you make two marks, 2 regions, and then when you're done, you go back and I have better ideas for better naming, because naming is always the worst part.
Yeah, exactly. Naming is the worst part.
It's the worst part.
One thing I was actually thinking about is if I could somehow...
Maybe different colors or so.
What I was thinking about was if I could somehow hook this up to auto commands and do something like, if you're like, depending on where the cursor is, then kind of like in Ruby files, limit yourself to a function. But I still haven't figured this out. I think this is still kind of like, just in my head for it at some point to sit down and hack on it. Now, and these are all the plugins I want to show you. I'm actually thinking there are more of them. But I want to talk about, do we actually need this? And the thing is, like, Sublime Text 2, this is a very powerful feature in Sublime Text 2, but in Vim, we actually have some very powerful tools of our own that can actually do this instead. The first obvious one is substitute. So, of course, you can rename startup with a magical change word or whatever, but you could just type in, of course, you don't see this one. I wonder if I can.
Why don't we see the?
Because there's just a single line.
Can you switch those 2 windows?
I'm trying to, but unfortunately. Oh, there it is. I haven't updated mine. Oh, there you go. I use the nets, don't bother.
Same problem with Xmon.
Xmodded, yeah. Anyway, so the point is %s, right? %s startup to foobar. Same thing. Okay. You want, if you want visual mode, you mark it S startup foobar. So it's really not that big of a deal, but the benefit of a multi-editing plugin is that you don't have to type this entire thing. I mean, startup is pretty quick. maybe we have something really big.
I actually have a mapping that will just take the word under the cursor and put it into substitute.
That's actually what I'm going to show in a bit. You beat me to it, but yeah, okay. So that's a cool thing. I wanted to show a bunch of other things though. One option is, of course, you could just copy it, like you just yank it, and then just paste it with Control R quote, and there it is. So a very simple way to do this. A different way would be to, for example, hit start, and now this pattern is in the history. So you can actually just use this, like just use an empty pattern. Yeah, and this would replace the last pattern. Anyway. This is especially useful if you have like this something more complicated and you're building it up. You could, like I also would like to point out G ampersand. This is a very interesting mapping. But
the best is when I have read that you can do the search with the visual. So you select the
like a visual star.
The visual star, and then slash you can do for everything.
Yeah, there's a plugin called Visual Star, and it's actually quite simple. I think there's a plugin called Visual Star.
The guy from London, he wrote an article in his blog.
I think, yeah. I think this is one. I think there's actually a bunch of them, to be honest, because it's very simple to implement. And I think it's even in somewhere in Vim.
In what function?
In the Vim wiki, yeah. It's very simple. In fact, I don't think I have a plugin. I think I just have the snippet from the wiki. But if you Google for Visual Star, you can find it. It's very, very useful, in fact, yeah. And G ampersand is also an interesting mapping because it like redoes the last substitution, which is particularly useful for like multiple buffers, by the way. But something I also learned from this help is that apparently if you use tilde, that's actually the last substitution, so you can tweak both of them. You can change the last substitution, last pattern. There's a lot of stuff you can find out from the help. I would just recommend to read that one.
It's normal command? No.
It's normal command, yeah.
G ampersand.
G ampersand. Like I think it was actually mentioned at some vimberlin meetup, but I'm not sure. I don't know where I learned it from. Like these days they just come up from somewhere.
Hi.
And yeah, what I wanted to show was what I was just told basically. I found it from a Reddit user Romain L, and basically what he does is he maps ampersand, and bear in mind ampersand is a built-in mapping as well, which does something similar to G ampersand. So you know, your mileage may vary. And what he does is he just maps this particular key to insert a colon and then a range for the last paragraph, for the current paragraph, which you may or may not want. Romain L likes this because it limits his scope to a paragraph, which is usually what he does. And then just insert the current words with a Control R equals the expression register. And you know what this does, quite simple really, what it does is if you type in, right now, if you type in ampersand, it's gonna, well, I need to actually execute this. If you type in ampersand, it's just gonna fill in your start with this. And it's a very simple, very obvious way to do this. You just get rid of all the s/ whatever, especially if you know what exactly you want to do. And you can tweak this. For example, you could easily make I don't know, like an ampersand curly brace, or ampersand P for the current paragraph, ampersand V for the last visual selection or something like that. So it's really just a matter of tweaking this kind of initial pattern to whatever fits your needs.
You can actually do CRCV, I think. That's what my map is.
CV. Oh yeah, just edit the.
I don't know what exactly it does.
V.
Like if you do CRCV, if you like
Change mode.
In what mode?
on command.
Oh, you mean
So.
that's what you mean. CV.
Change mode.
Like CRCV. Control R.
Control. Yeah.
W, sorry. German.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm not the only one.
Okay, yeah, that's actually true. You can actually do that. I didn't know that. So you can actually replace this with a Control W. That's pretty cool. Okay, that simplifies it a lot, actually. Let's see. So it will be.
I don't know if you did CR.
Oh shit, that didn't work. Why didn't it work? Control.
And I think you move.
Oh, you don't.
CR.
Yeah. You should not put a CR there because before it was there for the expression register. Let's see. So yeah, same thing. All right, pretty cool, pretty cool.
You could add a GC after it and then do a left, left, left to get to the position.
You could also do that, by the way, yeah. So this is kind of, it looks kind of weird, kind of funky, but yeah. So ampersand, and then like you have the flag there,
Slash.
and yeah, the slash as well.
And another left. No wait.
You could actually,
It's three lefts.
damn it, so complicated. Oh, never mind. You get the idea, okay? Just count the rest of the slashes. You'll figure it out. But anyway, yeah, substitute is pretty awesome, and you can really tweak this a lot to your needs. The other thing I want to point out, however, is that you don't, well, for more complicated things, you can actually use global. I've kept this global pattern right here. The use case is kind of weird. See, the funny thing is I don't actually use global a lot. But here's an example. Let's say you have this kind of string. Now, in Vim scripts, new lines are not evaluated in single quoted strings. And I don't know, like maybe you made a mistake and you want to replace all single quoted strings that contain a new line with double quoted strings that contain a new line. So you can do this with a substitute, but you can also do this with a global. Let's see, find a single quoted string with anything and then a new line and then anything and then a double quoted. And then normal, change surrounding single quote, double quote. Bam. And this didn't work. But okay. Oh yeah, because I needed to put another slash. And there you go, now it works.
But that depends on the surround plugin, right?
It depends on the sample, yeah. But my point was more like, my point was more like you actually use global. Like, if you're in a situation in which a substitute is complicated because you have to do some reordering, whatever, and it's simpler to just do a simple mapping or something, you can actually use global in pretty much the same way that you use substitute. Just find a pattern and do something on it with normal. You know? And you can use plugins and you can use whatever you like. So this is also a very powerful thing to do. And I have to admit, I don't do this as often as I should because of the next thing I'm going to show actually. But this is something that I can see, I think has potential to be automated a bit, at least, in the same way that you can automate S. But yeah, if anybody has ideas. Yeah.
Just a question. G operates on the buffer or where does it work?
Yeah, on the buffer.
Just
So global on the buffer. And of course, we have the awesome dot commands. Like, this is the shit. Like, this is the thing, right? you create a full bar, and you don't need to substitute. You don't need to do anything. You just use a dot, and it's done. And in this particular case, of course, you can use visual selection as well. But well, you can do the runtime path, funtime paths, funtime path everywhere, and then it's done. That's it. That's all you need to do. Now the dot also has some updates. I can point out, like, oh yeah, one example I wanted to give, the classical example of using a dot actually is using it to add commas to an array. Like you're formatting a table or something, and you just want to do like capital A, comma, escape, and then you just go around and you do dot, and it's awesome. Best use case ever. Now, if you want to do something like this, however, let's say you want to insert a function call here, right? And you're gonna go around and add closing brackets. Now, and you want to do this for every single item here, right? See, the problem is, you can do this with the visual selection.
No.
But there are cases where you want to do this with a dot, and it's a bit simpler sometimes with a dot. Unfortunately, I couldn't think of a good example. But if you want to do this with a dot, you have a slight problem in that if you do function call with a, and in fact I'm gonna unmap dot. Hope this works. And now you type dot, and the cursor is on the final character function call, and I have to go back and character. You can't just go downwards and press dot. Yeah. And for this, you can do this, however. Remap dot to and backtick opening bracket. Now, opening brackets, backtick open brackets, is the position of the last paste, or the last yank, or the last something else that I forgot actually. What was it? Help this. First character previously changed oriented. Okay. So since we've changed this, this actually means that it's going to perform a dot and then go back to the beginning of it. So I'm going to do a function call, and then it stays right there. Which is pretty convenient because honestly I feel like this should be default behavior anyway. I very rarely have a position in which I'm okay with it going forward. Unfortunately, this is not going to work if you want to use repeat.vim. If you don't know what repeat.vim is, you should Google it because it's an awesome plugin. But see, the problem with repeat.vim is that it does some magic overriding. So if you do this, the end or map, either you are going to overwrite the repeat.vim mapping, or repeat.vim is going to overwrite your mapping later on, which is a complete mess. I recently actually figured out a way to fix this. Unfortunately, it's quite verbose because see, the problem is repeat.vim does a lot of magic behind the scenes, like a lot. Like with the input buffer and like taking the characters and putting them elsewhere. It's a long story. And this is something that I hopefully I'm just gonna post. But if you for some reason if this is important to you, if you want to keep the cursor on repeat, this is something you just put in and it should mostly work. But yeah, the dot is awesome. However, the problem I see with the dot, and this is exactly what I wanna. Okay, so we have substitute, we have global, we have the dot. Why do we need actually the multi-editing plugins? And there are slight benefits to them that I'd like to point out. Here's an example. I'm going to go back to the first plugin, damn it, what was it called? I keep forgetting the names. There's so many of them. Mark Multiple. And I'm going to go back to the MRC, and let's say you're trying to rename startup to foobar again, right? Let's say you want to do this with the dot, because you used to use the dot is very simple. Now, in order to do this, if you change this to foobar first, now you have to find the next startup manually, and it might be far away. So what you could do is you could hit star first, then change it to foobar, and then continue with an N until you're done, right? But this is kind of confusing because you have to invert it in your brain. You can't make a change right now and then go to the next change because now the text is different. One solution to this, one very simple solution to this from Reddit user gfixor was simply to make a leader star mapping which doesn't move the cursor, which is pretty simple, right? If you type leader star right now, I'm going to turn on highlighting. If you type leader star, it's just gonna highlight it. I mean, you're just gonna put it in the search results, but it's not gonna move the cursor. So now you can make the change yourself. Foobar and then type next. Now I had a slight problem with this, however, which is why I rewrote it to like 20 times the size, for which I apologize. But the reason I did it like this, unfortunately, I'm way too verbose. The reason I did it like this is I wanted to make a slightly different mapping. Like basically, if you, let's say you want to do this, however, the change you want to make is to type underscore right here. So insert and type underscore. If you want to rename startup to start underscore up. So if you type star, it's going to jump, and it's going to jump to the beginning of the word, which is super annoying, right? If you type underscore star, it's not going to move it, but if you type next, it's still going to jump to the beginning of the word. So you have to go manually here and put the underscore. So what I implemented, and I put it under G star, which is actually a built-in one, but whatever you decide, is if you type G star now you notice that the search pattern is slightly different. I'm going to remove highlighting because it's not really helpful. But if I do my change now, if I type next, it's actually going to jump to the next word except to the same cursor position within the word. So now you can type dot again. Which is useful if you want to do, like, not change the entire word, but change parts of it. Like, you have underscores, you want to change to the next underscore, you have to insert something. So this is, a slight benefit, although I have to admit it's much more code.
What happens if you have another up in the same line? Will it work?
No, it does work because the pattern is this. all it does is it puts a more complicated pattern, and it asserts that it starts with start, except it just positions the cursor.
It matches. Everything has to be there, but the cursor position is after the ZS.
The key is the ZS, which, by the way, if you don't know about ZS is pretty awesome. It basically says, everything up to this point has to match, but it's not an actual part of the match. It's basically 0 with positive behind, I think. I hope. Anyway. It's a very useful keybinding. So yeah, I find this more useful, although again, as I said, it's a lot more code. But as I said, the benefit of these multi-editing plugins is that they just add these simple ways for common use cases. These simple methods for common use cases that you can kind of work around, but sometimes it's easier to just use a plugin for that. It's a different meta model, but it can in fact be easier. And for example, and they have different use cases in which they're strong. And my recommendation would be, like, if you feel that one of these use cases that you see can be applied very easily, then there's no harm in using a multi-editing plugin as long as you're aware of the alternatives. Because multi-editing plugins are not going to be as strong as %s ever, basically. Like, you can do some crazy shit there. But on the other hand, %s might not be as convenient in very simple cases. And okay, so that's pretty much it mostly. But what I want to end with is my own experiment in something slightly weirder. When I was thinking about this, I wanted to figure out the reasons why people want multi-editing plugins. And one of the reasons that I was told, particularly for the fourth one, the ones that interactively, as you type, changes the buffer, is that if you do this, if you interactively change the buffer, you see the changes everywhere. So you can kind of determine, what does it change? Like, am I doing something wrong in the other places, right? The problem is, I don't buy that. I don't buy that because you don't actually see all the changes. You see a very small part of them, and they can be spread out like everywhere in the buffer. A different thing to do, and I thought about this problem, and you could do something like, okay, you can fold only the parts. You can fold everything apart from the things that you need. And there's a plugin for that actually. There's a very nice plugin that helps you out with that, which is called, let's see, Fold Utils. It's a very old plugin. Apologies. My Euro pattern doesn't work properly. It's a very old plugin by Hari Krishnadara, and it has a lot of features. Last commit was 2006, but it still works quite nicely. And the feature that it gives you basically, imagine I want to rename def to function. Oops, that was interesting. Never mind. And I want to see the change everywhere, right? So I want to fold, and I want to say fold non-matching def with a context of 1. And it's going to fold everything except for the pattern for def with a context of 1 line. You can change this to 0 lines, and this will be even more compressed. You just pick the line that you need. You can use something slightly different, except not full matching with the same pattern, except use the spatial value -1. You get this kind of like an outline in which the text is the same, the same text, the same line you found, which is really awesome for function calls and function definitions and classes and stuff like that. And I was thinking about it, and this is one way to do this. This is one way to kind of get this benefit, because you can easily make this folding and then make your change with a standard. Yeah, unfortunately, destroyed it. and then you can make your match, like your change with a standard multi-editing plugin, like one of these, and you can actually see how it changes everywhere, which is pretty cool. Yeah. So this is a nice addition to it. Oh yeah, now you can see the small marker there, multi. It's a multi-mode. Complete fake, by the way, but never mind. But I was thinking about this, and I actually came up with a slightly different use case, actually. And I want to show this to you at the end. If imagine I do like a grep, right, and I get like a grep for let's see, for Vim, and I get a bunch of results, and I use ACK, but you can also use grep to get very similar structure. And the thing is, I see these results, and I can actually see all the places. Like you see how they highlight and everything, they're close together. But if I want to edit them, I have to actually go to that place, right? I have to actually find it. And Vim does this nicely with the quick fix list, but the quick fix list is a one-line thing. You can't really see a lot of context. So what I did instead was I have to go here. That's going to be simpler. I did something like this. I did a command called writable search, and I'm going to search for Vim. And darn it. I apologize. Just a sec. And
So you want to do a search replace?
search and replace. Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
Thank God GitHub is not down. It's been very hard with them recently for some reason. Let's see. So let's try this again. And if it doesn't work, oh, it works. Great. So I did a grep, and you can see that I see all the Vims here, right? And I can rerun this with a context of, say, 1 and get a smaller, more compact view. And the coolest thing is, I can now, well, actually I might want to, yeah, okay, I can now go into the multi-editing mode. Oh shit, I should not have done this. Alright, never mind.
Change this.
I can change, for example, vimberlin to full-bar again, because it's such a good idea. Ignore this. And now if I save this buffer, you can see that the change was propagated to the original file. So the cool thing is, I can now like rename, I don't know, I can rename globally Vim to Vim with capital Vim, with an ampersand or whatever. And it's going to change it everywhere to Vim, and now if I write this buffer, it's going to write it everywhere. And you can type, for example, you can use Ctrl WF to open up the original buffer. You can actually see it. And eventually, I would also intend to implement something like changing the line numbers here to change the window that you're looking into, and change file names and things like that, to make this an actual, very simple search and replace tool with a lot of context. Because I mean, we have this view anyway. So being able to actually go into there and change it seems like kind of the obvious thing to do. Of course, it's a complete prototype. Like it's probably super buggy. As you guys saw, it exploded like just now anyway. So I haven't really published it to vim.org, but yeah, it's in my GitHub repo, and hopefully to be somewhere close soon. And I see if I have a link here. I don't really, damn it. I think it's like writable search. Yep, it's this one. So yeah, like if you guys check out like after the weekend, hopefully, because weekends, maybe I'll have something properly working with documentation and tests. And yeah, it's not that connected. I just got really excited while I was researching this talk. I got this idea, and I thought this is probably the right place to share it. So yeah, that's pretty much all I got. To summarize, learn the built-ins, learn the Vim built-ins. But if you see a cool feature, the cool feature that was inspired by a different editor, don't shoot it down until at least you think about whether or not it might be a cool fit. And yeah, that's all I got. Thank you for listening.